and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
As Donald Trump's own family go sightseeing in the center of Moscow, strolling around the Bolshoi, across Red Square and sauntering into the Kremlin, entirely unmolested, in fact, pretty largely ignored, a state of panic has ensued in the Ukraine. The imminent downfall of Zelensky is predicted by, well, everybody, including Zelensky. And the state of panic exists in the hearts of the elite as new pictures and sinister videos are dumped on the internet of some of the horrors of Epstein Island. We'll be talking about all of that and more tonight here on the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway. The mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Looking at the pictures and videos of Epstein Island, to be honest, it's a bit hard to understand why so many people wanted to go there, and so many times. It looked a little Spartan to me, hardly the height of luxury, and nothing like what you'd get at a good resort in, well, Cuba, for example. But what you wouldn't get in Cuba is, well, the extracurricular attractions that Jeffrey Epstein was providing for his many powerful and rich guests. It looked, as I say, well, even a little sordid, and that would be the case even if you didn't suspect what had been going on there. There's a picture of a dentist's chair. Do I have to get down and dirty with you? It's a dentist's chair in a room which is covered with plastic masks and rubber human faces affixed to the walls. I don't even want to think about the kind of treatment that the patients in that dentist's chair got. But I do know that there's a very great likelihood that these patients were not there of their own volition, or were not even old enough to make a decision on their volition. Much more is promised tomorrow, and if it's good enough and interesting enough, of course, we'll bring it to you on Sunday. But if I had ever been to that island, which of course I have not and would not, I'd be worried about these pictures and videos, and in particular about the dump which the House Oversight Committee is planning on making tomorrow. But just as the idea that the Ukraine could defeat Russia in a war, just as the idea that the European Union could go on printing money at your expense to keep the war going when Trump has plainly, self-evidently lost all interest in its prosecution, well, the presence in Moscow of Witkoff, his special envoy, and Kushner, his own son-in-law, was surely a wake-up call for everyone. The Europeans gnashed their teeth and rended their garments and wailed awfully at the fact that they are entirely left out of this process. They project it onto Zelensky. They say there's no peace without Zelensky, but the ground is moving underneath Zelensky as we speak. Of course, the Americans are not uninvolved in making the earth move. The anti-corruption unit set up by the United States, backed by the United States, and moved by the United States, is set to issue indictments to no less than 77 members of parliament, all of them from Zelensky's parliamentary faction. Zelensky's chief of staff has already been forced to resign. There are documents, there are tape recordings, there are cash and paper trails, all of which lead to the chiseling little crook that I have been telling you was the thief of Kiev all through this stage of the conflict. These were called Putin talking points, but they are more correctly described now as United States talking points. It is the United States and its voice in England, the Daily Telegraph, who are leading the way in the uncovering of the corruption that they pretended did not exist all of this time. You can see the panic, of course, in Kiev. Apparently, 20 Ukrainian politicians have just traveled to Moscow to try to make their own separate peace with the Russian government. Desertions at the front line are at an all-time high. Fully 25% of the entire armed forces, the entire order of battle of the Ukrainian armed forces has now deserted. And then, of course, there are a very large number, scores of thousands at the minimum, of people who have simply surrendered in the face of what is now an overwhelming military sweep that is casting all before it. Kupiansk, I talked to you about so many times over these last 4 years. I kept asking you if you were ready to sacrifice your son, your way of life, your standard of life, your liberties in your own country to decide which side of a line the city of Kupiansk would lie, when it had lain in 4 different countries in the last 100 years. Not many of you put your hand up to say that you were ready to make that sacrifice for Kupiansk. Well, for Kupiansk, at least you will no longer be asked to, because Kupiansk is this night in the hands of the Russian armed forces. Like Pokrovsk before it, like all these other big victories, cities, towns, villages and hamlets are now raising the Russian flag all over the front line, and it's a very big front line. In fact, there are virtually no parts of that front line where the Russians are not now advancing. It's only a matter of time. And it's been said by people who should know that Zelensky has already been told that he must now resign. The Telegraph and the United States propaganda indicates to me that the person who's been picked to take his place, at least as an interim until elections can be held, is the Ukrainian ambassador to London. London, as always, is up to its neck in everything that is happening in Ukraine. The poor bloody infantry of the Ukrainian army, sent untrained, poorly clad, poorly armed, into a front line in which they were eaten alive, sometimes within a week of arrival, sometimes even less, have been betrayed by Zelensky and his gang in Kiev completely. The betrayal is not Donald Trump's. The betrayal started with Joe Biden when he was the Vice President of the United States, continued when he was, or his Otto pen at least, was the President of the United States between 2020 and 2024. The betrayal is by the European governments that fooled the Ukrainian public into thinking that their coffers were bottomless, that their armories were limitless, and that they, if necessary, would be ready to come to the aid of the Ukraine. None of those things were true. The coffers of the European Union are not just empty, the police are in and opening the books. The biggest crisis ever faced by the European Union in 20 years is unfolding this day in Brussels. The anti-corruption squad of the Belgian police have arrested, taken into custody, some of the biggest names in European Union foreign affairs, European Union diplomacy over the last decades. They have been arrested because of an alleged fraud amounting to many, many millions of euros. Some of the most famous people that you may well remember, Mogherini, for example, of Italy and of Brussels. She's under arrest, and many others will follow her. This crisis brings to a head the cataclysmic course of events over the last 4 years at minimum inside the European Union. They promised more than they could deliver. They threatened to steal Russia's money to cover up the fact that they had no money left. Indeed, there's a great deal of suspicion. As our guest Martianov said on Sunday, they may actually already have stolen it. Anyway, as Kushner and his party wandered around, I mean literally wandered around like tourists in Red Square and around the Bolshoi, it raised a number of questions. First of all, nobody, least of all the president, least of all a president that of a country that has been at war with Russia for the last 4 years, could have walked around in the center of Washington. They could not have walked around in the center of London. They might have faced protests. They definitely would have faced muggers and criminals who would have assaulted and robbed them. The fact that Witkoff opened with Putin, hailing, as I did to you, and as Elon Musk's father did to you, hailing Moscow as the new Rome, used to be the third Rome, now it is Rome, is an indicator of how fast and far the tables have turned. I remember presenting a television show, Kalimahorra, right at the very beginning, when the first package of sanctions against Russia was presented. And I remember the exact words that I used. This will all turn out to be the most deadly boomerang ever thrown by anyone. And my God, have I been proven right? Have I been vindicated? The European economies are now in free fall. Germany's deindustrialization is proceeding at such a pace that this very week, the head of the German Employers Federation predicted that Germany was on the point of collapse. Collapse. Christmas lights will not be lit in Germany this year. Such is the crisis of energy, which the German government has volunteered for, indeed bludgeoned and browbeaten other European countries to follow suit. When Hungary doesn't want to do it, Hungary is bludgeoned, threatened, blackmailed. When Slovakia doesn't want to do it, they are treated exactly the same. So if the head of German industry says his country is on the point of collapse, my prediction is he's probably right. The political fortunes of the war leaders I've adumbrated to you so many times, but it's worth making the point again, that if you add public support for Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron and Herr Merz together, you will not remotely reach the number 50%. These are political pygmies, dwarfs, who are wandering around, in Macron's case, rather like Caligula, in Starmer's case, like a constipated sitcom character who barely fits in to the white tie that he squeezed himself into this week. To say that China was now a major threat to the United Kingdom, having left the European Union, declared war on Russia. He's not content. He wants to make an enemy of everybody. And at the Mansion House, where else, in his white tie and tails, this week it was China. These people have stolen your money. They stole your money and gave it to a thief, when they must have known that he was a thief. When the head of a presidential office is accused of a £100 billion theft, then what do you think the people higher up got? We already know the millions that third and fourth tier Ukrainian civil servants have been caught with in the boot of their Mercedes. Millions of euros. This is not the great train robbery. This makes the great train robbery look like Thomas the Tank Engine. This is the biggest theft ever recorded in human history. And your leaders either are too stupid to have known that it was going on, or much more likely, highly likely, as Theresa May would say, they knew all along and may even have been getting a piece of the action. So the skids are under Zelensky. The skids are under his parliamentary faction. Everyone is jockeying for power and jockeying for a place in the new post-war order. And some of them will get it, no doubt. There will be a transition. But until this agreement is made, the Russian armed forces will continue to advance. And the faster and farther they advance, the more easy it is to advance still faster and farther. And all these people who told you all these lies, all these journalists, all these broadcasters, all these politicians, all these experts that told you so many lies, that Russia was losing, that Ukraine was winning, that you'd be barbecuing on the beach in Crimea the summer before last, they were all lying to you. And the only place that you got the truth was in places like this, that you found increasingly difficult to find, given the collusion and collaboration between big tech media giants and the governments that rule Western countries. The situation is dire, but not just for the reason you might think. It's dire because there will be no recovery. It isn't the case that if Trump declares an agreement with Putin next Tuesday that the war is over. The shooting war might be over. But as long as your leaders remain in power, in the chancelleries, in your capitals, they will try to continue the war by other means. What else can they do? They cannot openly admit defeat. They cannot openly admit that they've been lying. They cannot openly admit that you've been robbed. They cannot openly admit that the man they've hugged on the doorsteps of their presidential and prime ministerial residences so many times that his fatigues have become, well, fatiguing to the viewer in just about every country. They cannot admit to you that this little man that they called the new Churchill actually was just a corrupt, failing, incompetent crook. Because what would that tell you about their judgment and about their character? There's so much to discuss tonight, but the first guest this evening can do it much better than I. He is Colonel Douglas Macgregor. He is the real deal. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. I don't believe that the mainland European countries give a toss about Britain, and I'm certain that the United States would not sacrifice itself for Britain. That's why I say Britain is completely marginalized. As for the Trident missiles, of course, if the United States, which has dual control over these missiles, gave permission, for them to be launched? Of course, they would incinerate Russian cities. But what good would that do us? Because we'd all be dead, including the people that fired the missiles. You feel me?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Will Netanyahu get a state pardon? That is the poll this evening. Well, Trump has demanded that he get a state pardon. How's that for interference in other people's affairs? He doesn't want to just interfere in the politics in Israel. He wants to interfere in the legal system too. Will Netanyahu get a state pardon? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream. And if you're watching on the stream, please subscribe to the channel and give a thumbs up to the show. And if you're one of the creme de la creme, the vanguard, and you're a member of my Patreon club, that's patreon.com/George Galloway. You can vote there also. If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the international worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, some generations back a compatriot of mine, I'm very proud to say, is a retired U.S. Army colonel, author, and defense and foreign policy consultant, and a man who should be high in the ranks of the American government, but isn't. But your compensation is he's with us now. Colonel Macgregor, let's start with the diplomatic front, if you'll permit me. There are many wheels moving faster and faster now, and they're not involving the European Union, they're not involving Zelensky, not involving Starmer. Where are these wheels headed, do you think?
Well, first, let me say that you're a tough act to follow, George. I listened to your opening remarks, and they were great. We have to keep in mind that what's happening is very, very straightforward. It's not readily apparent to everybody in the United States, or for that matter, I imagine, in Western Europe. But the truth is that Ukraine, its army, its state are disintegrating. That's not a secret, as you've pointed out. Unfortunately, there are still a lot of people here who don't get it. And that's in part because you have numerous retired 3-, 4-star generals showing up on television to tell everybody that things are just fine and with a little more money, Ukraine can win. Pretty soon it'll be impossible to conceal the disaster. But the failure of Ukraine and the Ukraine project, the proxy war against Russia, is also leading to something else that you talked about, and that's the disintegration of NATO, and with NATO, the European Union. And your point about the absence of any focus on either the EU or NATO at this point, any serious focus, reflects the reality. The President of the United States has no intention of attending the NATO summit meeting next week. I think it's next week, because he doesn't need to. There's nothing to talk about. And the people in NATO have actually marginalized themselves to the point where, frankly, whatever they think or whatever they try to do doesn't matter. NATO is a bluff. It's an empty bluff. And no one in their right mind, as you pointed out in your opening remarks, in Great Britain or France or Germany or anywhere else that I can think of, wants to suddenly join the sinking ship of Ukraine and march east to stop the Russians from advancing. There's no interest in that whatsoever. And Putin has turned out to have exercised patience and been very smart and restrained the use of force only to the point where he needs to employ it. And this is now becoming very, very clear. I think, finally, the Kushner, the Witkoff visit was a reflection of the people that ultimately control and dominate Donald Trump. But they were trying to rescue something from the wreckage of Ukraine. They were trying to give President Trump an excuse to show up with President Putin and sign some document that would then confer some degree of gratitude and legitimacy on President Trump for having brought the war in Ukraine to an end. I guess this would have been his 19th war, or 20th war, whatever he says. That's not going to happen. And that's not because Mr. Putin wasn't willing to cooperate. He'd be happy to throw a bone to Donald Trump and say, here you go, President Trump. But he can't do it because there's nothing left to throw. So the game is up. It's over. And everything that you described, the picture you painted, could not be more accurate. We're all going to stand around and sort of watch a lot of people go down the drain. And frankly, we really ought to celebrate, because the people you're talking about deserve to go down the drain quickly.
It has been a catastrophic misjudgment, and I'm not an educated man like you. I left school at 16. If I could see on day one how this was going to end, it is astounding to me that all these exceedingly clever, or at least exceedingly well-educated fools in the governments of Western countries were simply unable to see it. You and I have been talking since the beginning of the war, and whilst the words change, the underlying meaning has never changed. That Russia, existentially threatened by this, could not lose. I mean, literally could not lose, because if they lost, they were over, and therefore would use any and everything that they had to avoid losing, just as the US would if faced with a conventional military threat from Mexico or from Canada. Why do you think the misjudgment has been so great, Colonel?
Well, the first answer is money. Money is responsible for a great deal. Do you think all of these retired generals and politicians that are piling on to talk about support for Ukraine, and Ukraine within a few more inches of victory if they only get a little bit more money, is not a function of money? Of course it is. These people are on the payroll. They've all been rewarded handsomely for years by the various banking interests in the city of London, New York City, everybody in Washington in one form or another. I suppose this is probably true in your country as well, but it's certainly the case in Washington. Almost everybody's on the payroll for someone. Some lobbyist somewhere is funneling money to people, and they respond to the gift, the financial gratuities. It's depressing. But there's another reason, and that is there's a false sense of absolute superiority in the United States. People are absolutely convinced that they cannot be challenged, that we are invulnerable, invincible. And the fragile economy, which is nothing more than another shell game financially, that's all going to collapse pretty soon as well, has been concealed from the American public. In a lot of ways, the arrogance in Washington is comparable to the arrogance in London in 1914, when large numbers of otherwise educated people were very stupid and entered that war when they never needed to get into it. And the British Empire, in my judgment, really began dying in great numbers on the battlefields of the First World War. It never really recovered. The Second World War simply finished it off. Nobody was thinking about the number one interest that should guide everyone's behavior. That is the survival of the state and the people that live in it. That's your number one concern. And anybody with that concern would not have behaved as these people in NATO have. They have demonstrated no interest in the survival of their own peoples, their own culture, their own identity. Nothing. They are all part of the globalist scam designed to extract as much money as possible and put it in their pockets and enrich them while their own populations and their own countries go to hell.
Indeed, and not even paved with good intentions. It's been a road ill-intentioned and corrupted, as you say, right from the beginning. So what now, Colonel? I mean, it seems to me that Trump is just allowing this war to continue, knowing that the direction is only one way. He dodged, or Kushner dodged, Witkoff dodged a meeting with Zelensky today. They are not interested in further talks about Ukraine. They're more into now post-war relations between the US and Russia. I won't embarrass them by giving their names, but the last time I was in Moscow, it was filled with Donald Trump-type Americans. They're all there trying to get to the front of the queue for the new post-world order. Some household names are now actually living and working in Moscow, mostly below the radar, but not entirely. It seems to me that Trump, true to type, is he's probably negotiating a Trump Tower in Moscow right now.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. Greed triumphs over reason at every turn. I'm sure he's not doing it, but it could be one of his sons. Let's be frank, that's been an ongoing problem. Witkoff's son, everybody's family is involved, once again, in enriching themselves. It's just shameless corruption. But there's something else happening, and that is there's an awareness that this thing called NATO and the EU are effectively irrelevant now. Now, that's a fault in large measure of Donald Trump. Donald Trump always had the power, as soon as he was elected, as the leader of NATO, to step in and sit down with the Europeans and say, look here, this can't go any further. This must end. None of us have an interest in going to war with Russia. We need to normalize relations with Russia. This man, Zelensky, needs to go. We need to put a new government in there. We need to end this war as soon as possible because, frankly, it's dangerous to us. He never did that. In fact, he's ultimately done the opposite. He said, I'm abdicating my responsibility for leadership of NATO. If you Europeans want to carry on the war, well, I'll sell you whatever you'd like to have. You may not see it for 2, 3, or 4 years, but I'll be happy to take your money. What a terrible thing to say. What a catastrophe for the American people in Europe. There was no sense of obligation to humanity, just as we've seen no sensitivity whatsoever to the mass murder and expulsion of human beings from the West Bank and Gaza. We've seen the same thing towards Ukraine. What difference does it make how many Ukrainians die? And oh, by the way, we can always lie and say the number's half of what's reported. All of that's beginning to go away. And in the meantime, Donald Trump thinks he can rescue the petrodollar by gaining control of Venezuela's oil resources, because it certainly doesn't have anything to do with drugs. There aren't enough drugs to keep London high for a week coming out of that place. So I think Donald Trump has made serious mistakes. He's been revealed for what he is. It's tragic because a lot of us supported the man because he said the right things, but he hasn't done the right things.
Well, when all is said and done, there's a lot more said than done in politics, Colonel. Just if I may change course, the standoff in the Caribbean, about which I've seen you opine, would I be way out of line in saying that the danger of American invasion is less now than it seemed a few days ago? I note that the Russians and the Chinese have restored their air services. Whatever Donald Trump says about no-fly zones and the rest, people are saying that some of the naval assets of the U.S. have returned to Puerto Rico and are no longer off the coast of Venezuela. I have been amongst those prominent in sounding the alert of an imminent American invasion. This evening, I'm not as sure it's going to happen as I feared a couple of days ago. What's your take?
I sincerely hope you're correct. The problem is twofold. First of all, and I've done this before, I've compared it to the Normandy landings. You can't assemble a large force that you're prepared to throw at your opponent and let it sit for days, weeks, and months. At some point, you've either got to use it or not use it. Eisenhower was trapped into using it. He had no choice. They'd built this thing up over many months and weeks. Everyone was ready to go. The weather wasn't perfect. They knew it was going to turn bad, but you had to go. He went. I have been worried that that would happen to Donald Trump. Now, it is not impossible that someone other than his inner circle has sat down with him and pointed out some facts. First of all, Venezuela is huge. It's the size of France, Germany, and Austria combined. There are 30 million people living there. At least half or more of it is triple canopy jungle. Certainly the border 1,380 miles with Brazil is almost impenetrable. There are only a couple of places you can actually cross the border. Colombia, heavily mountainous, very difficult to cross through there, although there are more points. And now you risk the war turning into something that you never wanted, which is a Latino crusade against the evil white Yankees who've come once again into Latin America to exploit them. You know, what a disaster. We need that like we need an extra hole bored somewhere. So, you know, the bottom line is, I hope someone has gotten to him and pointed these things out, because even if you were able to go in quickly, even if you were able to identify all the air and missile defense sites, all the radars, hit all the airfields, let the Marines come in and take the major international airport that's right next to the coast, and then fly in 15,000 troops from the army to be a stabilization force, you've still got to go to Caracas. Getting to Caracas, even though it seems to be close on the map, is no easy task. It's surrounded by mountains. You've got to go through tunnels to get into the place. And if you can't use the tunnels, well, you got to fly in, or I guess you could parachute people in. There are lots of crazy people in the United States Army that would welcome that and think that's great. But the opportunity for everything to go wrong is still there. We haven't even talked about putting in this Mrs. Machado. Could you actually do that? Will she survive the installation? We're assuming that you're going to get rid of Maduro easily. Well, the man never sleeps in the same place twice. You know, you don't know where he is at any given point in time. He's very well guarded. If you can't get rid of him quickly and easily, you're not going to be able to put anybody else in. And then, of course, there's the possibility that the Colombians and the Brazilians and people from across Latin America all decide to come in as guerrilla fighters to support the people in Venezuela. The whole thing, frankly, is insane. What should happen is that Donald Trump should say, you know, I've had an opportunity to talk once again with Mr. Maduro, and I now find him willing to reach an amicable solution. And so I am directing our forces to stand down. We will not rush away immediately, but we will gradually de-escalate as we see that the conditions that we've discussed with Mr. Maduro are fulfilled. I mean, that's what you say. What the hell you do is another thing. And then finally, you say, and by the way, next week I'm going to announce some new appointees, names for people who will replace the current Secretary of War, the current Secretary of State. Get a new team. Put new people in there. Change the direction of our country. Change the strategic direction. Move away from all the belligerence and bellicosity. Start talking about what really counts, which is what's happening here at home. Just as you described the perilous economic conditions in Germany and France and Great Britain, they're bad here. We don't admit to it, we don't talk about it, but our position is quite fragile. Here is where he needs to function, and that's why ultimately he was elected.
Finally, and as a very senior military man yourself, you must have been dismayed at how this former Fox News disc jockey turned Secretary of War threw an admiral under the bus or under the ship over the quite patently obvious war crimes that were committed with these fishing boats. The bombing of these boats in and of itself is a crime, but returning to the scene of the crime and executing people clinging to the hull it's the kind of thing that could get you executed in certain countries. And then to blame it on the military officer when you earlier claimed that you'd watched the whole thing and gave the order, kill them all, with presidential authority, it speaks so badly of the dysfunctionality in the Oval Office, doesn't it?
I think you're understating the problem. I think it's worse than that. I think the fish always rots from the head. Let's keep that in mind. The people for whom I feel the greatest sympathy are the people that have to execute the orders at the lowest level. And contrary to what everybody believes, if you stand there as a young sergeant or a boatswain's mate or something else and you say, sir, that's an illegal order, you're likely to be told by the officers above you, This is an order executed. If you refuse to do that, you will be arrested. And the man starts to think, well, what kind of a trial am I going to get? How am I going to be treated? Contrary to popular belief, if you're brought up on charges under the Uniform Code of Military Justice in the military, good luck. You're going to have a hell of a fight to survive. And then you begin to worry about your family. I would not prosecute, as a result, the people at the lowest levels who have enormous pressure on themselves that are very vulnerable. But I would prosecute, and I'd start at the top. And the first question is, I don't know all the facts. So the Secretary of War should be suspended pending a full investigation. Number two, the Admiral, if in fact he unhesitatingly carried out the order, he should be suspended pending an investigation and possible court-martial. Go after the people at the top. They're the ones that gave the order, if it turns out to be the case. But clearly, the inspiration for the United States Armed Forces, contrary to popular belief, is not Genghis Khan. It's a very different set of values that we talk a great deal about. And finishing off two poor, pathetic human beings hanging onto wreckage in the Caribbean Ocean, regardless of what you say they may or may not have done. And after all, we've never captured anybody. We've never interrogated anybody. We've never proven anything to be true in a court of law, let alone in a standard federal investigation. So we don't know anything. Those two people could have been escaping from the country for other reasons, or they were carrying something else. The other thing is, a lot of these boats are full of people. You don't pack a boat, a fast speedboat with lots of people, and then pile some drugs in there. Normally, you've got one or two people in the boat, and you've got the drugs in there. I mean, come on, we know this from experience. So we don't know, but what we need to find out is exactly what you described. If, in fact, the Secretary of War said, yes, kill them all, that's absolutely unacceptable to us as Americans. It violates the Uniform Code of Military Justice. He should resign. But first, we need to run an investigation, find out what's true.
Wow, big stuff. Thank you very much, as always, Colonel Douglas Macgregor, an absolute sage.
Well, it's good to see you, George. It's really good to see you. It's really good to see you free and walking around as a free man for a change. So keep it up.
Thank you so much, Colonel. God bless. I hope we get to meet sometime, somewhere. Probably not in London in the near future. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, retired U.S. Army Colonel, author, and defense and foreign policy consultant. Isn't it astonishing that someone like Colonel Macgregor, twiddling his thumbs in private business, when the people carrying out the official government business are so low grade? Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, instead of Colonel Douglas Macgregor? Are you crazy? I'll be right back after this short break. Stay tuned. President Putin definitely isn't Nikita Khrushchev, who was a clown, in my opinion. Neither is he Stalin, but he's much closer to Stalin than any other Russian leader has ever been. He has a mind that calamity has hardened and turned to steel. He is extremely cautious, but cautious only for a purpose. He is cautious in the hope that the goals of the operation that he's involved the country in can be achieved. But no one should mistake that caution for weakness. I've met the man. 3 times I've met him. I've met lots of leaders. I've met leaders from all over the world, including all of the British leaders that I sat in Parliament under. Vladimir Putin is a very determined guy. He has a clear set of goals. He told you about them in 2007 in Munich. He warned you in 2007 that Russia regarded NATO encroachment in Ukraine as a red line matter for the existential survival of the Russian Federation, which it is his job to defend, and nobody should make the mistake of thinking that he will not do that job. People misunderestimated Stalin, but Stalin wasn't Stalin when he told the beast of Berlin that we will crush you in your lair. Stalin wasn't Stalin. Putin isn't Stalin. Trust me on that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Will Netanyahu get a state pardon? Yes or no? Get voting on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, and if you're in the Vanguard, on the patreon.com/George Galloway. On the line is a legend. In Glasgow, it's Sarkar on Ukraine and the EU. What say you, sir?
Thank you so much, George. First of all, George, in fact, congratulations. Last week received 500 episodes and also almost 20 years since that Senate speech. Yeah. So keep up the good work, George. Yeah. We need more people like you than what we have altogether put in the parliament. George, a very important question. One by one, all the crooks of Zelensky are falling apart, being exposed by the same newspapers who accused people like you and many more sensible people of being Russian, people who speak on behalf of Russia. One by one, many of his crooked crooks of Zelensky, the second most powerful man in Ukraine, he's been found in corruption. A few days ago, one more guy was found of corruption. He ran away to Israel. Everyone who were sensible, people like yourself and many more, for the past 3.5 years kept on saying that the amount of money being sent to Ukraine is being used by other people while the common people are getting slaughtered. It fell on deaf ears. You guys were called names. But as they say, George, the one who laughs last laughs the loudest. But it's not a laughing matter, George. Just yesterday, and in fact it's yesterday or today, that Zelensky, that clown, once again went to another EU country, Ireland, who are promising 150 million more. Is something wrong with EU, George? I don't know what they're having. I don't know what they're having. Is it something which they're having with Zelensky is giving them? Bit by bit by bit, all the people who Zelensky trusted, whom the EU trusted, have been found in corruption. Some ran away to a different country. And still, they're giving money to prolong the war. I don't have to agree with everything what Donald Trump does, but at least he's trying to stop the war. What is wrong with EU, George? If they really want the war, send your own sons and daughters to fight.
Well, I'll tell you, without treading on any legal eggshells, the EU is and has always been a deeply corrupt institution. You'll know, but not everyone will remember, that they never, ever successfully audited the European Union's books. The Commission in Brussels has been a mess, a morass of corruption since the first time I visited it in the early 1980s. I remember the amount of ECUs, as they called them, ECU ECUs, that were swilling around and were being used for entirely nefarious purposes, was evident to me then as a 32-year-old man making my very first visit to Brussels. The edifice of corruption was already visible then, and it has only got worse. First of all, they have a rubber stamp parliament, which is living the life of Riley, which is under no pressure at all but to swan around and make deals in their own interests. The EU Parliament has no power, appoints nobody, is merely a talking shop, a Tower of Babel in these multiple European languages. And the salaries and the expenses that are enjoyed by these members of the European Parliament make members of national parliaments, including the one in which I sat for almost 30 years across 5 decades, green with envy at the life enjoyed by members of the European Parliament, who don't even have constituents to bother them, don't even have surgeries to attend every weekend, don't have to write 10 letters a week, never mind the numbers that an assiduous member of a national parliament would have to write. So first of all, the European Union is deeply corrupt and has been deeply corrupt from the beginning. Secondly, the raid that took place yesterday and more raids today on the foreign policy establishment. I'm talking, I want to give you a comparison. It's like the former Foreign Secretary of Britain being raided by the police and taken in handcuffs into custody. That's what happened today to Mogherini and other foreign policy officials, retired, but still in Brussels and still making hay, making money on the job that they previously held. This corruption scandal may bring the entire European Union tumbling down. It certainly will bring Callas. It certainly will bring von der Leyen down. Not just because of this case, but because it's the last straw. It's the straw that broke the camel's back. These people have driven us to the edge of the cliff with their policy towards the Ukraine and the war on Russia. They've presided over the ruination of European industry and increasingly the ruination of European society. And then they turn out to have been witnessing large-scale, massive theft going on their watch in their bureaucracy. So what's going on is partly that. Secondly, it's partly that, if you really want to make a difference in your country, you don't go to the European Parliament. You don't go and work in the European Commission. You do that when you're supernumerary, when there's no longer any use for you in your own country. That's what happened to von der Leyen. That's why von der Leyen is in Brussels, because there was no longer any use for her in German politics. And there have been many, many of these. It's why Rutte is at NATO, because the Dutch people decided they no longer had any further use for him. So it's the parade of failures that head for Brussels that is another reason why we're in the shape that we're in. Now, you mentioned Ireland. It's a very great pity what happened in Ireland yesterday. But never mind Ireland, Yvette Cooper turned up today in Europe and pledged £10 million for rebuilding the heating infrastructure in Ukraine. This is the foreign secretary of a country which withdrew the cold weather payments allowance from our own pensioners, which has presided over a fourfold, 400% increase in the cost of electricity and gas over these last 3.5 years. This in a country that has capped its own oil field but imports oil from Norway. This in a country which has sunk our own coal mines but is importing coal from Poland. This in a country where poverty, as in this bitterly cold winter, is on the march again, taking old people, taking sick people, and handing them to the grim reaper. 10 million, another 10 million, on top of the 3 billion that we've already pledged every year for 100 years. 100 years. The good news is we won't have to pay that because, well, we're not going to pay it to Vladimir Putin, are we? Sarkar in Glasgow, thank you for that excellent call. Will Netanyahu get a state pardon? Well, about three-quarters, more than three-quarters of you believe that he will get a state pardon. Now, you can leave your comments on the YouTube by scanning the QR code now. Leave a comment on the YouTube stream and I'll try and read them out. Crowhawk says, whilst MI6 was scouring the back streets of London, chasing KGB agents and Soviet diplomats, Israeli Jews fait accompli captured every organ of the British state. And Ian McKillop says the MI5 propaganda proceeds apace. Now they're trying to tell you the Ukrainian army will revolt if they're not allowed to be killed anymore. Yeah, right. Nate Dunning, 7304, says once NATO dissolves, many EU countries will return to normal relations with Russia. And Adrift in a Boat, 3452, says even the BBC presenters confirmed thousands of Ukrainian soldiers are going AWOL because morale is so low. That must have made the BBC choke. And 021 Johnny 1 says 125 million euro from Ireland yesterday to Zelensky. I'm glad I paid my taxes, says Johnny 1. Well, talking of Ireland, another legend's on the line. It's Declan in Dublin. On you go. Welcome, Declan.
Just let me explain how Zelensky got well paid for a day's work, without doing, well, he did a song and dance, but not the one he specialises in. The reason is, years ago, at the beginning of this Ukrainian farce, the Irish Prime Minister, the Irish government promised to rebuild the Rivne Oblast in Ukraine. Now, the relevance of that to all of Europe is our big multinational is CRH. It's a builder-provider. So, if we, inverted commas, rebuilt that oblast, the inner sanctum of Irish politicians would make a fortune from CRH, to whom they've been umbilically tied for well over 50 years. And the only game in Europe and in America is the arms industry and the high-tech industry associated with it. So by keeping the Ukrainian thing going, the people who matter, like Boris Johnson, etc., make a fortune on that. Now, staying in England's fair and pleasant land, Jeremy Corbyn has been filleted much more precisely than one of those Scottish fisherwomen would have filleted a herring. And the reason for that is when he was a big joke before he became leader of the Labour Party, and then they went after him in a fanatical way, saying he was a threat to world peace and all the rest of it. He wasn't a threat to world peace. He was a threat to the likes of Boris Johnson making untold fortunes out of this. And you go on about two sides of the same transom and so on and so forth. It doesn't matter who gets elected. The people who control Britain, who matter in Britain, and their equivalents in Ireland, America, and everywhere else, are, in the British case, MI6, the BBC, and the Foreign Office. I was all over the Irish newspapers yesterday because of my... there was a very nice picture of me with the former Grand Mufti of Syria, and because of my alleged links with Russia and Syria. And what they do is... it's water if it ducks back to me, but they clip at the edges so that whatever the ordinary BBC or Guardian, God help us, journalist is told to do, the message comes out, Jeremy Corbyn is a big threat to world peace. George Galloway, oh God, you daren't go near him. And as for those women who paint his wife's fingernails, right? So what they have to do is totally marginalise, and when they control the game, the referee, the umpires, the ball, the teams, it's a pretty easy thing to do. So that's it, George.
Well, that's not exactly it, because we have triumphed. And all the people who called us all these names are the ones that are now once again unmasked. And it's vital that the public finally get the message on this. I'm astonished that the same people who trumpeted us all the way to the Iraq war, the Afghan war, the Libyan war, the Syrian war, are still trumpeting on the war against Russia unleashed by NATO. They're still in their positions. As I always joke, the only two people that lost their jobs over the Iraq war were Piers Morgan and me. But both of us have come back. Both of us have bounced back. But the people that didn't lose their job got promoted. The editors, the broadcasters, the writers are all still comfortably ensconced, parroting the state narrative just as faithfully as they did 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, it will soon be, in the run-up to the war on Iraq. Everything they said about Saddam Hussein, they then said about Gaddafi, then said about Bashar al-Assad, and then said about Vladimir Putin. The propaganda is uncannily similar. And the latest I saw belongs in the Colonel Gaddafi's handing out Viagra to his troops, levels of war propaganda. But it's vital that that propaganda is less and less effective because of the existence of programs like this, because of the existence of Kit Clarenberg, the existence of Max Blumenthal, the existence of Jackson Hinkle and Dr. Christopher Halali, and so many others, Mint Press, Minar, the Chairman Hawes here in London on a slightly smaller level, but increasingly influential. These voices, we are the voices now. So we have won again. If I had to write my memoirs, Declan, it would be entitled, I Was Right About Everything. Let me take a quick break, because coming right up is Dr. Nicolai Petro, by popular demand, Professor of Comparative and International Politics and a distinguished author, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Stay tuned.
The 1897 edition of War of the Worlds
by H.G. Wells.
read by George Galloway. Available only on Patreon.
The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. Good heavens, said Ogilvy. There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape. At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the flash on Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
You get that reading and indeed all of our films free on patreon.com/George Galloway. If you become a patron of our Patreon, there's all kinds of delights there and in the pipeline. Now, will Netanyahu get a state pardon? You've got 35 minutes still to vote, yes or no. It's overwhelmingly yes. People have no confidence that the judicial system in Israel or the backbone of the president of Israel is worth anything at all. A lot of viewers asked us to invite for the first time Dr. Nicolai Petro, Professor of Comparative and International Politics and distinguished author. We've had the best of the military top brass in Colonel Douglas Macgregor, and now we have a very distinguished academic indeed. Dr. Petro, thanks for joining us. I don't know if you caught any of my interview with Colonel Macgregor, but if I summarize it, it would be this, that Ukraine army, Ukraine society, Ukraine government is now in a state of collapse, and no one can predict where all the pieces will fall. But what one can definitely say now is that the war is quite rapidly coming to an end, either by agreement or by military conquest. What's your take on those things?
Well, thank you for having me. I agree entirely with Colonel Macgregor's assessment on the military aspect. I would say indeed that the situation, I think in Ukraine now politically and increasingly militarily as well, I would describe it as catatonic rather than collapsing. It might be on the verge of collapsing, but right now there's a great deal of indecision and insecurity since President Zelensky lost one of his main architects of control in his chief of staff. And it's not even clear who will replace him yet. The budget has been passed this morning for 2026, but that was pretty much pro forma because the budget, it's a fiction. Roughly 45 billion of it, close to a quarter, is not even funded, and anticipates, as just to stay afloat, it anticipates getting some $45 billion from Europe to cover its current expenses. And that is in addition to the military expenditures, which we hear again, I think just over the last few days, we've heard the Germans say that, the German Inspector General actually saying that they have lost contact with the Pentagon over military assistance to Ukraine. So a lot of channels that would support a continued war effort are being shut down. Although we can never say, just as in a body, you know, if you begin to lose circulation, your prospects look dim, but we don't know when you will actually demise, when your demise will be.
The budget is, as you say, largely notional because it presupposes a 45 billion subvention from the European Union that the EU does not have, and it ignores the fact that there's a political crisis now right across mainland Europe, not really in Britain, where all the political parties on the top table support the government's line on Ukraine. But in countries where that is contested, as it is, for example, in Germany, the cracks are beginning to widen, aren't they? the head of the Employers Federation, described German industry as on the point of collapse. The opposition in France and in Italy, for example, where Meloni just postponed until next year any discussion on further assistance to Ukraine. So these organs are closing down, to continue your anatomical metaphor. These organs that have been supplying the blood are beginning to close down in Europe, aren't they?
Indeed. It's hard to see where the money would come from. And I think Mark Rutte, the General Secretary of NATO, recently remarked off the cuff that there is no plan B to America's financial support and military support. So, but there is nevertheless a worrying, from my view, disconnect between the bombastic rhetoric of Europe in support of the war effort and of President Zelensky himself personally and his government, and the reality that no one is willing to actually fund this war. And without that funding, it's hard to see how the war could continue beyond the next few months.
How deeply is the anti-corruption probe cutting? One heard today, I haven't seen it confirmed, that the Anti-Corruption Bureau is preparing indictments on no less than 77 members of parliament, all of them in Zelensky's faction. It looks to me like Trump is performing a kind of controlled demolition of the current power in Kiev.
That's a good observation, and one that is widely shared in the Ukrainian media, which I tend to follow assiduously. So, indeed, many people, particularly in Ukraine, assume that the anti-corruption probes are one of the levers being used to push the Ukrainian government into a more accommodating negotiating position. The numbers could be much greater than we even suspect. I hesitate to give large numbers or figures because they could well be in the billions. Certainly the former prime minister under the Yanukovych government, Nikolai Azarov, has speculated that it could be as much as 100 billion. He's gone on the record with that. And that would, of course, have to involve pretty much everyone in the current government, up to and including President Zelensky. But
most people,
there is no confirmation
most people
of that,
believe,
except indirectly.
Go on, sir. Go on.
Well, I was just going to say that there's been a sort of indirect confirmation in that instantly the state prosecutor's office in Ukraine has found a way to condemn Prime Minister Azarov to 15 years in jail, even though he's out of the country. Well,
there've always been jokers in that regime in Kiev, but it's unlikely there is no plan B in London. It seems likely to me that the current ambassador to London, I'm reading the Telegraph assiduously. It's easier for me than reading the Ukrainian press. The Telegraph appears to be preparing for His Excellency the Ambassador to become His Excellency the President. Do you think that that can fly?
It's possible, of course, but then I tend to agree with those who say anything is possible in Ukraine, but not very likely. This would be a direct slap in the face to the current administration. After all, Zelensky fired General Zaluzhny, and then sent him off into the wilds of the United Kingdom, trying to keep him at a safe distance from having much impact on political events in Ukraine. To bring him back would be a very serious defeat. And also, I have to ask myself, what function would he serve? The only function, in addition to his military career, that he could serve is that of a candidate in a future presidential election. But that election it wouldn't be possible to even schedule that election until a peace agreement was signed. And so far as I understand it, General Zaluzhny, Ambassador Zaluzhny, is not in favor of an actual negotiated settlement. So if he came back, it's very difficult to know what position he would take on the peace agreement that had just been signed. Would he accept it? Would he seek to reverse it? There's far too many uncertainties in his own position and how that position would play in a post-war Ukraine, which I would remind people, based on the polling data, is very diverse. In other words, some pollsters are convinced that after a war settlement, people would feel betrayed and therefore think of the military as heroes who need to be rewarded with maybe sinecures in politics, and that they would do well in post-war elections. Others, however, feel that there would be a backlash against the military, and that anyone who raised the prospect of a revenge against Russia or the Western allies that betrayed the Ukrainian military, that they would do poorly in a post-war election. So again, there's no clarity on how the military would do in a post-war election.
A banal question, but one to which I have no idea the answer. Who would vote in a post-war election? After all, there will be a good few million Ukrainian citizens who would by then be living in Russian-held territory. Would they be allowed to vote? In other words, the electorate which elected Zelensky will be a very different electorate to the one that's going to elect the post-war government, wouldn't it?
It would, but it's likely that the same policy would be applied in future elections that was applied even in 2019, which is that de facto Ukrainian citizens in the Russian Federation, of which there are probably 4 million or so, not to mention the occupied territories currently occupied by Russia, so that's another 4 to 6 million, including Crimea, they would simply not be allowed to vote. Whereas Ukrainians residing in the West would have an easier time voting. And this would certainly skewer the results in favor of the results that the current regime wants.
So finally, Doctor, with your great knowledge of these matters, is the likelihood, in your opinion, that there will be a peace agreement, or will the Russians just keep on advancing as far as they want to advance?
One will lead to the other. And that's clearly Russia's strategy. In other words, Russia will continue to push forward, expecting that this will lead to a more favorable political solution.
Yes, although the frontier will, of course, perhaps qualitatively change. For example, I made the point on Sunday that the missile attacks, drone attacks rather, on two Chinese-owned tankers that the Ukrainians first boasted of and then seemed to resile those boasts when they realized the import of them. That's a very powerful incentive for Russia to make sure that Ukraine has no access to the sea in future. Perhaps taking that logic all the way up to Transnistria. What's your take on that?
That would be a substantial expansion of Russia's stated goals, which have not changed from the beginning of the war. I'm not sure that cutting Ukraine's access off from the Black Sea would be an extremely punitive measure and would be difficult to accomplish because it would require, I think, a significant ramping up of resources. I think Russia could do it, but it would be a new phase and a new set of objectives in the war. The same outcome of securing Russia's tanker fleet and the security of the Black Sea region, as well as the border regions between Russia and Ukraine, could all be accomplished under the provisions of an actual peace treaty that was signed. After all, one of the major points among the 28 that are ostensibly part of the negotiations is a buffer zone between the two sides, and of course specific limitations yet to be negotiated on the Ukrainian armed forces, both in manpower and in weaponry.
Interesting indeed. Thank you, Dr. Nicolai Petro, a distinguished academic and author. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls all the way to Gayatri's special report. Stay tuned. Let's go to our old friend Declan in Dublin, who's online too. Go ahead, Declan.
Right, George. There's a very big protest in the town of Taipei, the last Christian village on the West Bank. If they lose this, they are finished in the Holy Land. I'd like to take the chance to salute Francesca Albanese, who is the greatest woman, I think, of our generation. And the hope is that there are other Francesca Albaneses out there who will do something, because the Western churches, the Catholic Church especially, and the other main churches are doing absolutely nothing for their co-religionists in the Holy Land, just like they did nothing for them in Syria or in Iraq.
They don't even talk about them, never mind do anything. And all these Christian politicians, and all these Christian leaders, and most of the Christian clergy haven't done or said even jack to come to their aid. They're not Christians, most of these politicians. When they say they're Christians, better count your spoons, or better still, count the burning Christian houses.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's go straight to Michigan. Basil is on the line, wants to talk Ukraine and Syria. Basil, welcome.
Hi, George. Thanks for taking my call again. I'm a big fan of yours. You always talk about Ukraine and the world, which is great. You also spoke extensively about Syria, which is awesome. But people never connected the dots. I don't think what happened in Syria and Ukraine is so isolated. I think it's quite well connected. I do believe Western Europe military professional men know that they have no chance in Ukraine to take over and destroy Russia from there. But I think I know about resources and control, etc. But I think maybe a small part of the reason of the war in Ukraine is to get Russia busy from Syria and focus on Ukraine. And I think the Russian people, again, I'm not a military man. I'm just observer. That's all. But I think made a terrible mistake for the Russian interest to just pack and leave in Syria almost. I know they're still in Hmeimim, but leaving, or letting the change happen. And I think that's one of the winning aspects of the West versus Russia is Syria. Syria, since the independence in 1946, has been under the Soviet umbrella and never been totally, openly, 100%, with the exception of Hmeimim, Tartus, under the Western Hemisphere, specifically the U.S. So I think the Western planners did a great job getting Russia, or maybe promised Russia to get off Ukraine if they let Syria go. I think Russia.
No, I think Basil, that's way too labyrinthine. I think the truth is more prosaic. There's a limit to what you can do for somebody else. If an ally is doing for decades, well over a decade, what it can to support the polity that is in power in an allied country, it can only do so much. It can't, it can't fight the whole war for Syria. It can't carry all the burden. It can't do all of the lifting. There has to be somebody there that you are assisting. If there's nobody there, then you're not assisting. You're actually doing it all yourself. And I think that's what happened at the end in Syria. I have not yet heard the official analysis by the leaders of the former regime in Damascus, so I have to try and put this together myself from all the very clever people who've written and broadcast about this. And my conclusion is that the Syrian regime was betrayed from within. And once betrayed from within, you can't ask the allies to prop up something that is no longer living, that has no longer any beating heart. Now, Russia is still in Syria. As a matter of fact, it's increased its presence in Syria. It had 2 bases. Now it has 3. And may even eventually have 5. The presence of those Russians there acts as some kind of bulwark against Israel, though not, of course, an entirely impermeable one, because Netanyahu himself was posing for pictures in Syria this very week. But the presence of Russia in Syria still provides some kind of bulwark against Israel and some kind of protection for the minorities, Christians, Alawites, Druze, who have been massacred and tortured and disappeared since the Al-Qaeda regime came to power in Damascus. The land grabs of Israel are so blatant and so extensive now, it scarcely needs me to accentuate it. All those who cheered the fall of the Assad regime in Damascus are left, at least those of them who actually claim they support the Palestinian people, for example, are left, I hope, embarrassed. And I'm not asking for an apology for them. Many of them are not the kind of people who ever apologize. But I hope in their hearts they realize that their cheering was for a very Pyrrhic victory indeed. Thank you, Basil. Danny Delaney says in the chat, do you realize there's 9 billion people on this planet, all at the mercy of just 2 people? A genocidal maniac and a casino-owning mobster. Let that sink in. Well, Danny, I don't entirely agree with that. I think Russia has agency. China has lots of agency. Brazil has agency. The BRICS have agency. The SCO has agency. There are many powers now, many poles that are appearing around the world. So it's not quite as bad as you describe it. However, let me tell you something that you probably don't know. All the population of the world, the entire 9 billion people in the world, could all stand with 2.5 meters square around them in the tiny country of El Salvador. Just think about that. Now, is your name up in lights tonight? Who's in the MOATS Big Donors Club? The mother of all talk shows, Wall of Fame, is joined this evening by Anthony Gratrix, George J. Ashkar Jr., who's a weekly donor. Thank you, George. Fadi Echder, Gerard McGarry, and Malcolm Dix. A big thanks to all of you and everyone else who donated at all. Please become a MOATS donor tonight. Scan the QR code or visit moats.tv. Speaking of big donors, someone who made a very handsome donation this very week and is a legend on this show, it's Donna in Panama. Oh, Donna, I'm sure you want to talk about Venezuela.
Yes, I do. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, you're on the air. Yes,
okay.
You're on the air.
Okay, well, first of all, I listened to the interview between you and Tucker Carlson, and I didn't realize that it wasn't a metaphorical exile, that you're actually outside the UK, which is very distressing, but I am very heartened by the people who stood up for you. You mentioned, I think, some Tory or former Tory MPs who are standing up for you, and it is absolutely shameful that that everyone in the entire parliament isn't standing up for you. This is, I can't, I'm gobsmacked. I just can't believe it. And I wanted to also tell you that you may know this, but the condition, your heart condition that you have, another person that I admire, his record probably wasn't perfect, but I admire former basketball star and former Senator Bill Bradley, had the same condition. Mm-hmm. And
did he?
You know, he did. In fact, what's tragic, and it shows how stupid my fellow Americans are. Sorry, but not all of us, but too many. He was running for president when he discovered it. And, you know, he came clean about it. He told everyone, you know, as you had. And he said, you know, it's just my heart kind of goes bump, bump, and then kind of waits, and then bump, bump, bump again. But that small thing, my mom was saying to me, she said, I think that's going to hurt his chances. And I think she's right. He never became president. And I can tell you for sure, he would have been better than anybody we've had since that time and after, because he at least was a man, a kind man of principle, a very learned man and a humble man, a man of integrity. And he could have done it. I mean, my gosh, if a 79-year-old and 80-year-old can do the job, he could have done the job with a little thump in his heart. Anyway, I'm trying to give you a little bit of encouragement. He lived many, many years.
Well,
I think he died. I'm trying to give you encouragement. Yes, it only stopped him because people were stupid. Maybe I'd like to think now, if it happened, it would not stop him. Anyway, so what I was going to say is that it's so hypocritical what the Americans are doing, and way too many Americans are buying this nonsense. A lot less people, as we know, thank goodness, are waking up And because of independent news media like you and Tucker Carlson and the Mint Press News and all the ones that are doing a great job, many of whom have been your guests, and that's great. But there's too many who still are drinking the Kool-Aid. And about drugs, I don't know how it is in the UK, probably the same, maybe worse. But in the United States, in the old days, first of all, nobody but like some black jazz musicians used to take illegal drugs. Nobody else did. I mean, they had them. People in the Navy sailors and officers, they had access all over the world to drugs. Nobody touched them. They knew it was dangerous. That's what Ross Perot said. He said we had access to drugs all over the world. We didn't touch it. We knew it was dangerous. But, in the 60s, people started taking drugs and everything, most of whom quit. They got married. They became very middle class. They had kids. And most of them quit doing it, or maybe on the weekend a little marijuana, and that's it. But unfortunately, too many others became seriously addicted. And if you had been seriously addicted when I was growing up in the 60s, you would have been shamed. Your family would have shamed you, but we're not allowed to shame people anymore. We're not allowed to. We're supposed to, they're addicted. It's a medical issue. But I just wonder, I know I sound old-fashioned and cranky and like a conservative, like your conservative grandma, but I just wonder, are we really better off now that we live in this society where we feel sorry for everyone? We feel sorry for the morbidly obese. We feel sorry for the drug addicted. I just wonder, is that really the best way? Because I haven't seen, I'm sure in some cases that the kind and helpful and Betty Ford Rehab Center approach, I'm sure it does work sometimes. But I just wonder if we're really better off living in this world where anything goes, and we just have to either accept things that we used to not accept, or we have to feel sorry for them.
Well, we're definitely not better off. Thank you for your kind words about my own situation. I had a session with my cardiologist, the most eminent one, and I'm going to another country in a few days, and I have already lined up, as it were, a second opinion from an equally eminent cardiologist in that country. My cardiologist today indicated that a saving grace is that although I have arrhythmia, my arrhythmia is rhythmic. In other words, it's predictable. My heart goes boom, 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 and it's better if it's predictable, apparently. It's when it's random and unpredictable that it can be fatal. So as long as I take my 10 tablets a day, which I couldn't take but for the assiduity of my good wife, Gayatri, who will have to stay by my side every day, morning and night from now on, because I'd probably take the wrong tablets in the wrong order and so on. But as long as I take those 10 tablets a day, I should be fine to continue. I will not be able to play basketball, and I won't be able to run for president, but with a bit of luck and with God's grace, I won't be disappearing from your screen anytime soon. But the point that you make is, it's almost a philosophical one, but it's one on which I'm entirely on your side. We watched, Gayatri and I, the other night, Apocalypse Now. The apocalypse, of course, was the descent into the heart of darkness, literally, because it was based on Conrad's novel of the same name, of Colonel Kurtz and the acolytes around him and the people who were sent to kill him. This descent into the heart of darkness was, of course, paved with drug addiction. I've not only never taken any narcotic, I have never seen drugs, never mind taken drugs. So I'm not able to speak from personal experience, but it seems to me self-evident, and the evidence is overwhelming, that these drugs at best will demobilize you, demotivate you, make you less able and effective in challenging the things that are wrong in the world around you, and at worst will reduce you to a state of pitiful dependency and an early death. Who has an interest in that? Well, we could range wide on that question, but we can definitely say, without any fear of contradiction, that the drugs that are destroying America are not coming from Venezuela. In fact, Venezuela is the very last place that they are coming from. Secondly, the people making the vast profits on drug trafficking and the selling of dangerous drugs are not in Venezuela. They are overwhelmingly in the United States itself, and in the state of Florida, and in the city of Miami, to be more specific. Thirdly, the notion that Trump is doing what he's doing to Venezuela as part of a war on drugs is completely and absurdly negated by his pardoning of a guy who was found guilty in the American courts of smuggling 400 tons of cocaine, the Honduran former president. So the reality is, this war on drugs was never waged. It's not waged at all. We pretend that we've made a war on drugs, but we have not. And then when we declare that we've lost the war on drugs, we'll legalize the drugs. And production of those drugs and distribution will pass from Mexican cartel, Colombian cartel wallahs to, well, the equivalent of WD and HO Wills in the United Kingdom, the big cigarette people in the United States and in the other countries of the West. They will move into the production and distribution of drugs. Some people who think that's a left-wing thing to do cheer that. I merely lament it. But I'm very, very happy to speak with you again, Donna. Thanks very much for that call. Now, huge numbers on the podcast. I mean, I know I keep saying this, but following the Tucker Carlson interview, which went out last Friday, we're in the top 40 in the UK for politics, top 40, and the top 40 in Canada. We're now, remember I asked you to get us into the US charts? It's 100, the US chart of 100. Well, we didn't just do it. We're now in the top 80 in the United States, the top 20 in Spain, New Zealand, Hungary, Chile, Indonesia, and Ghana. A very, very proud development in our MOATS podcast. You can download it by scanning the QR code now. Please leave a rating once you've listened to it. Please give it the proverbial thumbs up. It helps us grow the podcast and other people join our audience. Let's go to Arkansas, from which a fair amount of drug trading in the past between Latin America and the USA took place. It's Raymond in Arkansas on Venezuela. Go ahead, Raymond.
Well, unfortunately, Santa's legal department made a release, and they said, he cut back like from a dozen outboard reindeer to like 3 because he didn't want to, give the signature of a high-speed trafficking vessel. But with the airspace closed, he's got to worry about all the other little boys and girls in the world. And I'm sorry, Venezuela, thanks to Pete, because as Carolyn said, those people clinging to that wreckage, swimming for their lives, were a threat to Americans, and we needed to double tap them. But hey, here's the thing. If you want to stop drugs in America, it's a spiritual problem, America. You have to stop being the largest patron of them. You have to stop providing the market, the base for it. It's an internal thing. You never and isn't it interesting that we have a dispensary on every corner giving you some Aldous Huxley Soma? Go get your free weed. Come on. They want you asleep. They want you watching sports ball and drinking suds and not thinking about anything. Hey, Vietnam, that's what it's going to be. Venezuela is going to turn into a new Vietnam, and we're stupid for doing this. And what we're doing is we're moving this whole global flashpoint to our hemisphere, if you ask me.
Well, you've coined a phrase there, Vietnam. That will run and live, I think. I still don't know if it's going to happen, but if it happens, it will be as catastrophic for American society and for the U.S. military as Vietnam itself was. Raymond, thanks for the call. My good friend Terence, a legend of this show, in Reading, in England, wants to talk about Imran Khan. On you go, Tel.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway. And I have a friend who lives in Cardiff. His name is Genghis, and we used to call him Genghis Khan. I hope you're not in Cardiff, but wherever you are, God keep you safe.
No. I'm nowhere that the Metropolitan Police can arrest me again.
Indeed. You were safe enough in everybody's heart, I know that much. You can't beat it. Anyway, 2 points. The first point is that wonderful rag called The Guardian for Intellectuals of Britain. There was an article yesterday saying that he really set the criteria for when conscription is going to come, and he had a picture of this man called Charles. I believe some call him King. He looked like Mary Berry in camouflage. I don't know how he dressed himself, but he looked as inspiring as possibly as worst case of hemorrhoids you can have. So they're starting to tweak that, the agenda. Even the intellectuals are bonkers to think that anybody's going to be conscripted to die for this German magpie family of over 150 years since. Secondly, and more importantly, is the fact I was told today by my friend in Gurgushti in Pakistan that Imran Khan's sister, one of them I think, has been in to see him. So there is, he's okay. That's all that can be said. That hasn't been let out anywhere, I don't think, as yet. But thank God the man that refused the Americans to fly over Pakistan airspace is still alive, and long may it be thus. Can I have your opinion on both, sir?
Well, amen to that. Imran Khan is alive, but he's not well. He may physically be well, but he is mentally tortured. He has been held for almost an entire month, completely incommunicado, with the court-instructed visiting rights of his sisters and contact by phone with his two sons in England has been completely denied. He's in solitary confinement and not allowed to talk to anybody at all. He is incommunicado. He's now been held 4 years on one bogus charge after another, which keep getting defeated in the courts, and then another bogus charge on the steps of the court after his acquittal is produced, and he's dragged off again to Adiala jail. He is being kept in C class, a death cell. C class, the lowest class of prison cell in Pakistan. It's literally, in his case, a death cell with no contact with any human being. And even when the High Court in Lahore instructs the army chief to allow visiting and telephone communication with his family, communication with his lawyers, communication with his party men, even when the court instructs, this is not done. So I've now got an absolutely viral, millions of views on all platforms of the simple statement: free Imran Khan, you fools. Free him because he's the elected prime minister. If there were elections in Pakistan, he would again sweep to power. But fools, because what do you imagine you can gain from this? cruel and inhuman treatment of a man widely revered in Pakistan and widely respected across the globe. This man was, after all, the captain of the Pakistan cricket team when it was at its greatest. He was an international sporting superstar. He was a Maradona of cricket, a Pele of cricket. He was one of Pakistan's finest sons, and you're treating him like this, and for what? And how do you think it's going to end? If he dies, God forbid, in your death cell, even if he were to die choking on a fishbone, you will be blamed for it. And your country will be consumed in fire. And that fire will spread around the whole world. So free Imran Khan, you fools. That's my message. Let me take a quick break, and then it's Gayatri in the studio. Stay tuned. His approval ratings are in the toilet. He won a huge mandate well less than a year ago, and he's thrown it all away. He has an approval rating of just under 40% now, and a disapproval rating of all the others. There are no don't knows in the issue of Donald Trump. And so he has maximized the number of people who hate him or dislike him, and he has systematically undermined the voting base that formerly liked him. And I don't know whether that is because of his donors, because he's intellectually challenged, because it's of his age. I really don't know.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, first of all, there's a very important Workers' Party live event tomorrow. It's a Your Party special. It will be looking at the political developments in Britain with the launch of the Your Party and all the comic and other developments that took place there. So the Workers' Party will be discussing the launch of Your Party. Used to be able to say Jeremy Corbyn's party. It's no longer. He's been defenestrated. I might even have been able to say Zara Sultana's party, but she's been defenestrated too. We must get used to the fact that this is a party to be led by 20 people whose names we don't know yet. But you do know Chris Williamson, my former parliamentary colleague, deputy leader of the Workers' Party, will be joining our good friend Mark Belshaw at 9 p.m. on all Workers' social media channels tomorrow night. Let me squeeze in a call before I bring in Gayatri. Vladimir in Slovakia. We don't often hear from Slovakia, Vlad, so most welcome. What would you like to say?
Thank you, Mr. Galloway. It's an honor for me to talk to and be at your show, and I admire you for a couple of years, and I want to say thank you for what you have done in all your life, beginning in your stand in Iraq war and all those American occupations in Libya, Syria, elsewhere, and mainly in your stand on Ukraine and Gaza. I'm a mayor in a small village in Slovakia, and last year I made a collection for people in Kursk, and we collected 52,000 euros, and we went to Moscow to give it to those who were in need, who were killed and occupied by the Banderas in Kursk. It was a big piece in Slovakia, and I'm so glad that I did a little part what I could do, but you do a great job, and you put it in your sarcastic words, and you even make fun of those Americans. And there's a talk show in Slovakia, and I'm a guest sometimes, and I always say that there's a person, George Galloway, and he has a great show, and you call these United Snakes of America, and people are really happy to listen to me and to express your words. Even I'm not able to express them the way you do, because you can hear I don't practice English anymore because I used to.
No, but you've done very well in a second language. As it happens, I mentioned Slovakia tonight earlier in the show, which is not something I do every day. But Slovakia and Hungary are becoming two countries in the European Union that are being vindicated by the course of events. They were blackguarded, anathematized. They were called rogue states. But actually, the pace at which things are moving, Vladimir, your two countries were merely ahead of the curve. Everyone's going to be soon wishing that they'd followed Hungary and Slovakia on the Ukraine conflict, don't you think?
Yes, I think so. And even now in Czech Republic, the elections went the right way, and those parties who are going to form a coalition, they are also not as much as Hungary and Slovakia pro-Russian, but they are not so much pro-Ukrainian as the previous government, which is very difficult to give up now, because the president, former KGB agent, and he changed his dress, and now he's progressive American, all of that. So he don't want to, name the new government, and he postpones the form to name the new government, because they are going to be on the same line as Slovakia and Hungary. And I think it's bit as Colonel Douglas Macgregor always says, that the pieces start to fall, and I'm happy that Slovakia and Hungary will make a little hole into that.
And it's not so little. It's not so little, Vladimir. Somebody has to go over the top first. Somebody has to be the vanguard, and your country can be proud of what it has achieved. Brilliant. A mayor in a town in Slovakia called Vladimir called and spoke so well on the mother of all talk shows. Gayatri has joined me in the studio with the social media news roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, since the launch of the global campaign to free Marwan Barghouti, which has gone very well, very viral, a group of over 200 celebrities, like leading cultural figures from around the world, have joined and signed the letter demanding the release of the leader Marwan Barghouti. And amongst them are the football legend Eric Cantona. There are musicians like Annie Lennox, Sting, Brian Eno. We have some British household names, Gary Lineker, no surprise, but also Sir Richard Branson. Thank you for that. Well done. Actors Stephen Fry, Mark Ruffalo, and Javier Bardem are, of course, they have been vocal on the Palestine issue, of course, as well as the best of British, one of our favorites, Benedict Cumberbatch.
I'm amazed to see him in that picture. I mean, I have enormous admiration for him as an actor. In fact, he's been on our screen every night for the last, I don't know how long, as Sherlock Holmes. He's a brilliant, dazzlingly brilliant Sherlock Holmes. And there he is now supporting the release of Marwan Barghouti. That is really significant.
Significant, yes. This is
big names of sport and culture. And Stephen Fry was a surprise also. I mean, Stephen Fry appeared in our Killings of Tony Blair film. He spoke very powerfully and very well. But he lost his way over Israel-related matters over recent years. But he's now on the side of the angels in this regard.
Exactly. So this is a very positive boost for the campaign, and we are heading towards the right direction. So we're going to keep the pressure up to free Marwan Barghouti. Now, to continue on the topic of prisoners in Israeli jails. Only last week, Israel released a 15-year-old U.S. citizen. Don't know if you've heard the story, but Mohammed Ibrahim, born and raised in Florida, he went to the West Bank to visit his family, and one night, in the middle of the night, his family home was raided by Israeli soldiers. He was blindfolded and taken into detention. He was accused of throwing stones at settlers. Now, this has been denied. He denied this. So since his arrest, he was refused any contact with his family or anyone. Yeah, there was no visitation rights. Imagine a 15-year-old American boy stuck in the Israeli dungeons, okay, for 9 months long. So the pressure, there has been, of course, a growing pressure, and in the end, 27 U.S. lawmakers signed this petition to free him, and he was freed just last week. Mohammed Ibrahim, he turned 16 whilst in prison, but he is a U.S., an American boy. So he obviously came out of prison way skinnier than he was. He contracted a skin disease. He has, of course, suffered torture and abuse. At this point, his family is just celebrating the fact that he's back, because what are the chances that his other cousin, also born and bred in Florida, his name is Saifullah Musaled, he was only 20 years old, 5 years older. He was also visiting his family in the West Bank, and he was beaten to death in the West Bank, yes, by settlers. So much for America First, right? You have, in this example, this young boy, 15-year-old, 9 months imprisoned. God knows what he experienced. So I am just raising this matter because, of course, these are Palestinian original American citizens who have been, one of them, well, at least Mohammed has been successfully released. But what about those who are not, who don't have that extra pressure? So, and children.
Marwan is not the only political prisoner.
Yes, this is our point.
There are 12,000 at least people that are hostages.
Yeah,
if they were Israelis, they'd be called hostages.
Exactly, and that's how we should call them, because, you know, these people have never been charged. They don't get charged, so they're just taken and placed into prison without any further rights. This is the condition we're in. So that's why the pressure to free Marwan is, of course, he's the symbol, he's the lead figure for the overall symptom.
Yeah. Now, I did appeal for a song.
Yes.
Tell them what
Yeah,
happened.
well, we did receive a wonderful song, and we are going to show it to you on the next show, because we're just putting it together, making a
proper video of it. But
exactly.
It's a very beautiful and catchy song by a man in England called Tom Cody. And I don't know Tom at all. I don't know his background. I don't know if he's in the music business. But if he isn't in the music business, he should be, because he's put together a beautiful campaign song that we will reveal to the audience on Sunday, God willing.
God willing.
Anything else, Gayatri?
Well, just to close the fact that on the 3rd of December, it's the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And so, to that effect, we want to dedicate the show to all the Palestinians who are now disabled, have lost their limbs because of the genocide. And so the Health Ministry have made a call on this matter that more than 6,000, these are of course very conservative numbers, have lost their limbs. More than a quarter are children. And of course they're suffering because of the blockade, and therefore no entry of further medical supplies and prosthetic limbs. So that's for them.
Wow. Now, let's close with an announcement about tonight's big donors. You can see from what you've just heard from Gayatri that this show is vital. It is vital to growing an international audience of concerned and conscientized people who are roused, who have awoken, and who have a voice, and that they have to use it, whether it's in Slovakia or in Southern California, or in Suffolk, or in the other Western countries that can listen and hear and see this show and realize that there is another point of view, and we are determined to bring it to more and more people. So, going up in lights right now is Ian McAvney, Richard McCluskey, Justin Webb, James Glass, a regular donor, thank you James, and Monica Tratnik. They're the best donors of the night. Don't be left behind. Even if you can only leave £1, $1, or €1, do it now on MOATS.tv. It's been marvellous for me, and indeed for all of us here at MOATS TV. We are now a 24/7, 7 days a week operation. If we're not on the air, we're on the social media platforms. Follow us. You'll thank me later one day. Good night.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Go get 'em, George.